few weeks after the end of the AHL's regular season, we are back with another episode of the Belleville Sens podcast, episode number 15, with myself, David Foote, and Joel Vanderland here as always. This week we're going to keep it a little bit casual, a little unstructured. There's not a whole pile to talk about in terms of the Belleville Senators, other than the fact that we have a new head coach, kind of. Dave Bell has been promoted officially by Ottawa as the new head coach of the Belleville Senators. Interim tag removed. We will talk to the coach for a few minutes on this week's show. We'll also recap what's happening in the Calder Cup Playoffs so you can stay up to date, and we will catch up with the news out of the ECHL, where the Kelly Cup Playoffs are underway. Our ECHL affiliate, the Allen Americans, are into the second round, led by Kevin Mandolese in net. And Mando aside, there is a handful of familiar names to Belleville Sens fans who are having some pretty good playoff runs. So we hope you'll stick with us for the next little while as we discuss all of that. Before we get into things, always a reminder to subscribe to the show wherever you're listening. Give us a 5-star rating if you would. A review would help as well. And we'll also remind you that season ticket renewals are still ongoing. You can head to BellevilleSens.com for all the info on that as we continue to already plan ahead for 23-24. How's it going, Joel? How have the last couple weeks been?
Well, it's been going well. Just kind of getting through our year in review stuff. Put out a recap about Sens in school yesterday, and continuing to kind of put a bow on this season. But it's been good. It's been a little less hectic around games, but still the passion we see from the fans and the interaction's been really good. Yeah,
we've been doing a lot of chatting on this show about kind of the inner workings behind the scenes and how things go in the front office. And this time of year is kind of strange, especially for the members of the staff that are working game nights, which, let's be frank, is everybody. But you go from basically, going 100 miles an hour for 6 months and drop down to, like, we're in a school zone now. We're going 40, but there's still lots going on. And it's kind of an interesting time to find your rhythm and figure out what you got to do in these weeks since the season ended and leading into the summer, when we'll finally get some time off, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, too, the work never stops really around here, which is good. And I know we've been putting out our year in reviews, our player profiles, and recapping kind of the community initiatives we've done. So it's been good, and it's always good to still connect with the fans, because at the end of the day, they make this thing tick, and I know they've been really appreciative of the work we've been able to put out, and they like to review as well, and they like to keep up with the players, so it's been great in that regard as well.
Speaking of the year in review, posts and social activity that's been going on. If you want to hear the full interviews with some of your favorite Belleville Sens from our exit interview series, you can go back to episode 14 of the podcast, and we've got the time codes listed there at the bottom of the description, so you can jump to your favorite player if you haven't heard them yet. Other option is to just wait till we make our way through the roster, and your favorite player gets posted up on the social media, so you'll be able to hear from them there. And I know a lot of the guys are taking some time off, as they told us they would be, traveling around doing non-hockey related activities for as much as they can before they have to start getting into the summer training schedule. But the action has continued, obviously, since the regular season ended. The Calder Cup Playoffs into the division semifinal round now, after a pretty exciting first round of action as well. At least one upset, I would say. A couple of teams that maybe we didn't expect to get through in the Eastern Conference. So we can tell you that Charlotte beat Lehigh Valley in the first round 2-1. Hartford sweeping Springfield 2-0. So the reigning defending Eastern Conference champions are already done. Utica Comets took Laval out in 2 games in that play-in series. Surprising for you, because I thought Laval was going to be a lot tougher to deal with than the Utica Comets seemed to make them.
I think a little bit surprising the way that Laval really turned it on over that last 2 weeks. And when you see that they got Raphael Harvey-Pinard back, Caden Primo was playing regularly for them. So Utica, I think they've proven their worth over the season as well. But I didn't expect a sweep out of that series.
The games were 4-0 Utica and 2-1 Comets in the second game of that best of three in overtime. And if you've been following the Stanley Cup playoffs at all, Akira Schmid, who has played against Belleville this season and was outstanding for the Comets through the year, really turning heads and helping the New Jersey Devils, their parent club, to get past the New York Rangers in the first round as well. And I mean, that's just one of the stories. Carter Verhaeghe has been incredible. He's with Vegas now, right? Florida, right, sorry. And he had played a bunch of games with Syracuse against the Belleville Sens over his tenure. Darren Radish, who was unbelievable for the Crunch this year, with Tampa having a pretty good series against the Maple Leafs before they went out. It's a fun time of year to really see those guys who, and how about Ty Karche as well in Seattle with the Kraken. Kingston boy, AHL Rookie of the Year, gets called up, scores his first goal in his first NHL playoff game. There's a lot of really nice tie-in between the two leagues come this time of year because, as we know, the spotlight is so much bigger and brighter when the Stanley Cup playoffs are on.
Definitely is, and you speak about Karche. He was skating here this summer at the Wally Dever Arena just below our office, so there's connections everywhere. As we know, this is a tight hockey community, so Alex Lyon, another name that's played some big playoff games as well, so it's awesome to see, and I think it just shines a light, like you mentioned, on how good the American Hockey League is and the development path that can be taken through this league.
On the Western Conference side, Rockford took out Iowa in 2 games in the first round. Coachella Valley getting by Tucson 2-1 in the first round. Colorado over Ontario 2-0, and the Abbotsford Canucks over Bakersfield 2-0. That was round 1. We're already about 3 games into round 2, all best of 5 series as well. And here in the Eastern Conference, in the Atlantic Division, and I'll say now that all the teams that are in the playoffs are actively playing now. In that first round, the top seeds didn't have to play. They got byes through, and it changed based on what division you were in. But now everybody is in action, and as of recording of this, which is Thursday, May 4th, around the lunch hour, Providence down 2-1 to Hartford, Hershey up 2-1 on Charlotte, Toronto Marlies are up 2-1 on Utica, Syracuse and Rochester need a deciding 5th game in their series. The Texas Stars eliminated Rockford 3-0. Manitoba's up 2-1 on Milwaukee. Calgary's up 2-1 on Abbotsford, and Coachella Valley and Colorado are tied 2-2. Let's hone in maybe on those North Division semifinal matchups. 4 teams that we are obviously very familiar with, and starting maybe with the Toronto and Utica series. Game 1 was a 6-5 Toronto win at home in overtime, a wild game, to say the least. Comets came back with a 7-2 win on April 29th, and then the Marlies with a 5-2 win again yesterday. That would have been Wednesday, May 3rd, to take a 2-1 series lead. This one, for my money, is probably going to need 5 games.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And you look at the way the games have gone, I'm a little surprised how high scoring they are when you look at Nico Dawes and you even look at the other side, Eric Shelgren. Those guys we've seen throughout the course of the season really put up some stellar numbers. So I think that would be the biggest surprise for me, is how high scoring these games have been.
Yeah, well, and especially given at the rate the Marlies were not scoring at the end of the season, right? We were really kind of unsure about how they would carry themselves over into the playoffs, given that they were basically junk at the end of the season. But certainly Greg Moore and Captain Logan Shaw and the leadership group there in Toronto have been able to really get that team turned around. And in a battle, though, with a Utica team that's really good on home ice, and that's where game number 4 is going to be. But B, just so feisty and physical, and they've dealt with a lot of roster movement as well this season, more so due to the call-ups than the injuries, but they've weathered that storm well. And Kevin Dineen, who we talk about on our broadcasts a fair bit, has just been steadying that ship with an expert hand.
He has been, and we mentioned it earlier. Kier Schmid's in the NHL, and they're still ticking and they're still going. So not many teams would be able to weather the storm, like you mentioned, when you got guys like Holtz and you got guys like Schmid in the NHL. And you look at both these teams, both their parent clubs are in the battle in the second round of the NHL playoffs as well. So organizationally, very healthy, and just going to continue to kind of drive the ship for Toronto. You look at Logan Shaw's had a good playoffs. They've been getting some good depth scoring as well. Ryan Chajowski scored twice yesterday. You look at Kyle Clifford, he scored a nice penalty shot goal as well. So I think that was something that they were kind of hoping would get clicking. We saw it a little bit in the last two games of the regular season when we played Toronto. We saw Mark Johnstone get on the board. Graham Slaggert's always been kind of a pain to play against as well. So Toronto's kind of starting to get clicking on all cylinders here. I think we kind of expected it to happen, but you mentioned that last month and a half, just the way they were playing, you kind of felt like, when's it going to happen? When are they going to get back to being the team that we know they can be? And they've done that over this couple of games here against the Utica Comets.
Now, we're predicting this series is going to go 5 games, but there's a chance it doesn't. Toronto is the 2-1 lead. Marlies were really good against the Comets this season, 5-1, 2-1 at the Adirondack Bank Center in Utica, which is one of the toughest buildings to play in the American Hockey League, and that's where the next game is going to be. I think Toronto likely will be feeling confident, but that, again, is a home ice team in the Utica Comets. They don't lose a lot in their building, and you can expect the fans, I would imagine, to play a pretty big part in how Game 4 goes as well, so that'll be worth keeping an eye on. If you're following along, Game 4 is Friday night, May 5th, depending on when you're listening to this podcast, at 7 p.m. Game 5, if needed, would be back in Toronto 4 in the afternoon on Sunday, May the 7th. So that's the one North Division playoff series still underway. The other one has gone basically as I would have expected it to. Syracuse and Rochester, those upstate New York rivals, are in a pretty heated series. It's tied 2-2. Syracuse with a 3-2 overtime win and a 3-0 regulation win, both at home to start the series. Then they lose 2 in Rochester, 8-5, and then 4-0, and they'll host Game 5 on Saturday night. Again, not surprising, I don't think, to see Amherst and Crunch go the distance in this short series.
No, I don't think so at all, and these two teams certainly do not like each other one bit, and I think it's kind of went the way we've expected it, going the distance. And you look at Malcolm Subban, the way he's been able to play these last 2 games and really kind of keep the Rochester Americans in it at times. I'm not surprised to see these teams go the distance in this series as well because of the way that they're so structurally sound. Good coaching. Benoit Gru's been around forever. Seth Appert's one of the best up-and-coming coaches in the American Hockey League. So these teams are ready for each other. They know how to play each other, and it's going to be a fun Game 5 in another raucous building.
And again, this season, Syracuse 6-5, 1-0 against the Amherst. Rochester 6-3, 2-1 against Syracuse. Over the last 5 years, the Crunch are 30-19, 6-2. And again, there is a lot of parity between these teams. They both have very strong fan bases. They are, cornerstone franchises in the division for sure, if not the entire American Hockey League, and some stars on both sides. That may be more star-studded on the Rochester side of things, but if we learned anything about the Syracuse Crunch this year, it's that they can beat any team, and they just work so hard, and Ben Gru really gets his guys motivated and ready to play. Not to say that Seth Appert doesn't on the other side, but that Syracuse team is tough, and like Utica at home, Syracuse is almost unbeatable in their building some nights.
They are, yeah, and it all kind of starts too. You mentioned Alex Beret-Boulet. He's got 7 points in 4 playoff games and kind of leading the ship there, and then it kind of continues to go down the lineup with some of their younger guys. Simon Ryforce has come on this season. We saw him at times kind of take over games against the Belleville Sens with his speed and the way that he can cycle the zone. So, you look at it, and it's not surprising at all. Rochester maybe a little more veteran-laden, Michael Mersch and those types of guys. So it's definitely a good clash, and certainly exciting for the fans in the American Hockey League to watch.
And again, not too far away from home if you're looking for things to do on weekends. The Marlies will host Game 5 if needed on Sunday. That's if they don't win Friday at Utica. And Game 5 between the Syracuse Crunch and Rochester Americans in Syracuse on Saturday, May 6th, as we profile the North Division teams and get you caught up on what's happening on the rest of the Calder Cup Playoffs. We'll do a Kelly Cup playoff update in the ECHL in a little bit, but when we come back, the now full-time official head coach of the Belleville Senators, Dave Bell, who had the interim tag removed this week, will join us for a few minutes to chat about that news. Stay with us on episode 15 of the Belleville Sens podcast on the Belleville Sens Entertainment Network.
Get in the game. Start planning now for the next season of Belleville Senators hockey. Renewals now open for new and returning season seat members. Buy your season seat membership before May 31st and you'll be entered into the weekly draw for awesome prizes, game-worn jerseys, to Sens prize packs and more. One lucky fan will receive their season seat membership for free. More info on season seat memberships, flex packs, and the Business Elite program at BellevilleSens.com. Go, Sens, go!
Episode 15 of the Belleville Sens podcast rolls on alongside Joel Vanderland. David Foote here. Glad to have you with us. Again, another reminder to subscribe to the show, which is probably more important now than ever, seeing as we're not doing the usual weekly episodes. We're going to kind of continue this format through the summer. Keep an eye on the headlines, follow along with the playoffs, see what's newsworthy and noteworthy, and when we've got enough stuff that's worth a show, we'll put one together, we'll pop it out there, and you'll be able to listen. Things like the recap of the Calder Cup Playoffs, our upcoming Kelly Cup recap, and then this segment, which will include an interview with the now no longer interim head coach of the Belleville Senators, Dave Bell. Ottawa officially promoting him to the full-time head coach role for the upcoming season. The rest of the coaching staff will be back as well. Ben Sexton, Justin Peters, Freddie LeMay in the video room. So that group will be together again. We will get the feedback from the coach in a couple minutes about what that means to him to have that tag removed. From outside the coach's office, what does that mean to the Belleville Sens to get that interim tag off Dave Bell and to kind of know who's going to be driving the bus over the next 9 months or so?
I think it's very important when you talk about free agency coming up and guys wanting to know who's going to be leading the ship, right? And you look at the players that played here under him that really took to him, and they're going to want to come back now. They're going to want to continue to play for David Bell. You saw the success at the end of the season, the 14-9, 3-3 record. So I think it puts a little bit of a known commodity behind the bench, and it's certainly going to help to get these things sorted out well and ahead of free agency and the NHL draft and all those key touch points in the offseason.
And it's only a one-year deal at this point, but I think given the circumstances, if we put the neutral hat on for a moment, it makes sense. There was some question about whether Dave Bell would be back again after the Sens failed to make the playoffs, but I think just given the amount of adversity and challenge that this team faced over the course of the 72-game regular season, they put out a pretty good effort come the end of the year. And when you look at how the standings shook down, only missed by a couple of points. This was not a failure of a season by any means. And maybe you can quote one Giannis Antetokounmpo when it comes to whether or not winning a championship equals failure. But I think it was a successful year on a lot of fronts for the Belleville Sens, and I think given the coaching change mid-season, Dave Bell and his staff have a lot to do with that success.
They do, and there's not a lot of teams that will get to the 500 mark when you look at the amount of transactions, the 53 players, the 10 starting goalies. So that's a big credit to this coaching staff. And then you look a step further and you look at the players that were able to develop, the Max Ganetts, the Ridley Greggs, the Angus Crookshank comes back from missing a season and he leads the team in goal scoring. And Igor Sokolov continues to set franchise marks and gets his NHL recall and fits into that continuity of what they want to do with DJ Smith and David Bell, and it looks seamless, right? So I think that's a big part of it too. Is I know when Ryan Bowness spoke, he said the the individual preparation, the commitment, the detail, all that stuff that David Bell really drives forth. They really took that into consideration when they were going to remove the interim tag, and I think they have all the confidence in the world that he's going to continue to do that and get these prospects developed the right way.
And, as you say, a little bit of familiarity is never a bad thing when you are turning the page and heading into a new season. So that's what we think of the news. Let's hear from the man himself, the head coach of the Belleville Senators, the third in franchise history, Dave Bell, on the Belleville Sens podcast. Congratulations, Coach. Thanks for taking some time for us.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the reaction to getting that interim tag removed? A little bit of weight off the shoulders, perhaps? How do you feel?
Yeah, might get a little bit more sleep at nights now, but it's obviously a huge honor. Obviously, to get a head coaching job in the American League, it's a job that a lot of people want, and I was given the opportunity, so I'm very, very thankful for it. With the Ottawa Senators, with Ryan and Pierre, and just ready to run with it.
Obviously, a testament to the work that you were able to do with this group over the second half of the season, despite, of course, not getting into the playoffs.
Well, it wasn't me. It was the group. Ben and Fred and Justin did a lot of the work too. I mean, everybody was, we were down a guy obviously in here, so everybody had to pick up the slack. So I thought as a group, we did pull together as a staff and got things done and got things going in the right direction. Just ran out of runway there.
Yeah, as if there weren't enough challenges for this team to face. You have to take over mid-season, which is rare in this league, and be down a staff member, as you mentioned, throughout the second half of the season. How difficult is it to kind of get through that? Like, what impact does being down a coach have on a staff?
Well, it just puts more on everybody's plate, right?
Yeah.
So the responsibilities I had as a defensive coach, I still tried to keep some of those, but obviously took on all the head coaching duties. So, Ben took on some of the role that I was doing, and so did Justin. Came from being in the stands to on the bench, so he helped out as much as he could with, the forwards and just anything he could do day to day in practice. And then Fred, tried to streamline a lot of the pre-scouts and take some workload off of our plates that we normally would sift through ourselves, but just didn't have the time. So, like I said, it was a huge group effort by the entire staff.
What's the most exciting part about now having a full off season to kind of put your plan in place and to be able to, I guess, kind of do things the way you want rather than having to adjust halfway through the season?
I think the most exciting thing is where the organization is.
Yeah.
Heading up top, obviously looking for a big year, and just watching the playoffs now, how players from their American League affiliations have come up and made an impact. So that's where I'm excited to, be a part of pushing guys up to the NHL and getting them, making the NHL team successful. And I think pushing them down here to get up there, the byproduct will be having a successful season down here. I
was going to ask how much of the Stanley Cup playoffs you've been watching. It's been pretty entertaining from the neutral perspective.
Yeah, the world's upside down. Boston's out, Colorado's out, the Leafs are in the second round. It's the world's upside down. Tampa's out.
Yeah, it's been fun for sure, and obviously next season, hopefully more fun when the Ottawa Senators crack the playoffs. And looking at next season as we chat with head coach Dave Bell, what does the process look like roster-wise this summer? When would fans maybe start to get an idea of who may be back, although we know we do have a handful of legitimate players that will be returning again?
Yeah, I think obviously the drafted guys that are either coming back still on their entry level or the RFAs, I think, a lot of those guys will be back, but then that's up to, the NHL club, Ryan and Pierre and Sean McCauley and the group up there. They look for the free agents, and that won't be until, after the draft, and they'll be looking after the draft right now, focusing on the draft, and then build our team through free agency. So hopefully we get some guys that were here last year back, but again, that's above my pay grade, and whoever they get in here, I'm sure they'll be good people and good players, and we'll work with them.
You mentioned the rest of your staff, and obviously Ben Sexton and Justin Peters and Fred LeMay, and they'll be back next year as well. How nice is it to, again, be able to go through the planning process with that group for the next few months?
It's amazing. They're all great people, and Ben's been in here every day, and we banter about things we might change, things we might tweak, players, potential lineups, just different roles that we're both gonna try to to improve little things that we did on the bench or we did in practice. So it's, to have this time to plan that and not just be in scramble mode for 2 months, it's nice.
Yeah, for sure. What's the rest of the summer look like for you? I know you're still coaching a little bit of baseball and among other things. What's up for the next 2 months?
Baseball, still trying to get certified to be a baseball coach. That's quite the process. But no, I think my daughter's in swimming and my son's in baseball, obviously, and then hopefully some camping with the family again, just to get outside and shut off the computers and shut off the hockey brain and just relax and get some sleep.
Yeah, and then right back at it in a couple months. September will be here before we know it.
Yeah, we'll have the draft, and then we'll have development camp right after the draft in Ottawa for a week there and get a look at the new guys and some of the guys that were playing junior this year that are in the system. So that'll be nice to go in there and get the eyes on the new blood there, and then just go from there.
And I'm sure we'll chat with you over the course of the summer again, but thanks for this, and congratulations again on having that interim tag lifted. Well deserved.
I appreciate it, David, and I'm glad we don't have to say that anymore.
Absolutely,
Thanks.
We don't. Dave Bell is the head coach of the Belleville Sens, so we'll be back on the Belleville Sens Entertainment Network in just a moment.
Get in the game. Start planning now for the next season of Belleville Senators hockey. The new Belleville Sens Business Elite program is a season seat membership just for business. Use tickets to treat your staff or attract new clients. Benefits include AHL TV game packages, exclusive member events, and more. All packages offer a VIP business experience like in-arena signage. More info on season seat memberships, Flex Packs, and the Business Elite program at BellevilleSens.com. Go, Sens, go!
On to our third and final segment of episode 15 of the Belleville Sens podcast. Thanks again to Sens head coach David Bell for a few minutes of his time this week after being officially named the head coach, having that interim tag removed. It sounds like he's pretty excited to have the reins for a full season, and it was interesting to kind of hear his perspective on the challenge of dealing with one less member of the coaching staff last season. Again, with all the change and everything else, it really didn't seem to impact that coaching group too much, and I think they were able, for the most part, to really continue, sending the messages from Ottawa and keeping this team competitive down the stretch, even with all that in front of them.
Yeah, they really did, and I think that's one of the main reasons why David Bell has that interim tag removed, right? And they're all coming back. So the way they were able to handle that adversity, the way they were able to keep developing prospects, get this team within striking distance of a Calder Cup playoff berth when it looked pretty bleak at times. I think that's a big credit to David Bell and Justin Peters, Ben Sexton, and Freddie LeMay. So great work by that coaching staff, and great to have them back for another season.
And we'll have more, I'm sure, from the coach over the course of the summer. The coaches are around. The players tend to get out of town for the summer, and they come and go, but the coaches are here and around. Belzy's already been involved in the Smile Cookie Day at Tim Hortons this week. I'm pretty sure he's going to be hucking some Big Macs out the drive-thru at McHappy Day next week. So, and that's all just part of our summer community programming. If you've been a fan of the team for a while, you'll remember that our guy Belly was out and about all summer long last summer, and out at all the big events around the community and golf tournaments. And that'll be the case again as well, so keep your eyes out for Belly and the crew over the course of the summer. And if you have a summer event that you'd like to perhaps have the Belleville Sens at, shoot us an email, info@BellevilleSens.com. We'll see if we can't get something worked out as we head into the deeper portion of the offseason. Of course, Calder Cup Playoffs still continuing. Talked about that earlier. Now we're going to talk about something we don't really talk too much about, and that's the ECHL. We only tend to talk about it when we've got guys coming up and down, which, again, I guess this year was more so than normal. But it's playoff time, and Kelly Cup Playoffs are into the second round, and they do the more traditional 16 teams get in, and they're down to the Elite 8, if you want to call it that. A lot of familiar names still playing hockey, and that's, of course, names familiar to Belleville Sens fans.
Yeah, and when you look at the amount of roster moves this year and the amount of PTO guys coming up and forth and back, and that means there's a lot of ECHL guys still playing and making big impacts in the Kelly Cup playoffs, and I think it starts with Kevin Mandolese getting his team through to the second round and plays the first round, puts up stellar numbers, really backstops them into the next round, and they'll play the Idaho Steelheads, who are a good team as well. So Max Newton's still kicking around with Reading, and he played a couple of games, got a point here in Belleville. So it's great to see, and you want to see these guys succeed, and they work so hard, and they get their opportunities, and they come in and they really work for everything they have, right? We've seen Jared Luco Savages and Matthew Boucher, I think, is a prime example of a guy that made the most of it and stayed all year. And he's not looking back at the ECHL now. Now he's looking for an AHL deal. So Zachary Massacot's in Allen as well, a player that was signed to a two-way AHL ECHL deal at the beginning of the year for some defensive depth, and still relatively young, 21 years old, big defenseman. So these games mean a lot to him for his development as well, and trying to get another AHL deal next year. So
it's funny, if you look at the 16 teams that qualified for the Calder Cup playoffs this year, I think the Belleville Sens had a player from at least one player from at least 9 or 10 of those teams that were still in the first round, and that number shrinks even more here in the second round. Cincinnati, Toledo, Allen, obviously, Reading. I think that's it out of the 8 teams that are left. But, it's, again, people might look at the American Hockey League and Belleville as a step down from the NHL. I think you also have to look at it as the step up from the ECHL, and this is a goal for a lot of these guys who are still playing right now. And we talked about that Stanley Cup playoff spotlight being big and bright. Well, the spotlight on any playoff hockey is pretty big, because what comes after the playoffs? Signing season. You have a big playoff run with your ECHL club. You never know what could happen, and I promise you there were guys that we saw this year, Kevin Mandolese included, who are really trying to make an impact here in the Kelly Cup playoffs to firm up their plans for next season.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And you look at Kevin Mandolese, he played in the NHL this year. He played in the AHL.
He's got to be, I think we were talking about this a few weeks ago in terms of Belleville Sens players who have played in the ECHL, AHL, and NHL all in one season, and there's got to be, less than 5.
Yeah, I think it's him and maybe Hogberg, I think, when we looked back. Yeah. We quickly looked over it, but that's impressive, and people like winners too, and when you go, people are going to go to bat for guys that win for them, right? And when you go down and you talk to coaches, and you look at Dylan Ferguson, he still talks about his trip to the Kelly Cup Finals and winning that with Fort Wayne, and it just shows that these guys have the ability to kind of handle that pressure. And don't get it wrong, these are high pressure games there in the ECHL as well.
So we won't run you through all of the Kelly Cup playoffs. We'll give you the matchups for some of them, though. The Newfoundland Growlers are up against the Reading Royals in the North Division final. It's the Jacksonville Icemen and the Florida Everblades in a little Florida battle for the South Division title. The Central Division sees the Cincinnati Cyclones take on the Toledo Walleye, and the Mountain Division is where we would focus our attention, and that is because the Allen Americans, the ECHL affiliate of the Senators, are into the second round against the Idaho Steelheads, and they've got home ice as well. That series will start tomorrow. That's Friday, May 5th. Again, depending on when you're listening to this. And Kev Mandolese, after playing all 6 games in round 1, I would imagine is going to continue to carry the torch for the Allen Americans into round 2. The deeper that this run goes for Allen, I think it's only going to pay dividends in the development of Kevin Mandolese. These are technically the most important games that he's ever played in now in his career, being in the second round of the playoffs, professionally, of course, outside of what he was able to do in junior.
Yeah, and I think, too, it just kind of bolsters his case, right, when he comes back to the signing table this offseason and says, look, I've been able to win at the ECHL level. I've won a game at the NHL level. I've played well at the American Hockey League level as well. So the Allen Americans are used to winning. They win a lot. And he wants to carry that tradition as well. I think he's kind of been embedded in that culture now, right? And they're trying to win another Kelly Cup, and Kevin Mandolese is going to be a big reason if they can do it.
Both teams 4-2 in the playoffs, and actually, if I'm reading this correctly, Idaho went 4-0 in overtime games this year in 2023. So that's pretty wild. They've had a intense playoff run through the first round, and we'll continue to keep an eye on how the Allen Americans are doing. Likely we'll wait until after the series ends, or unless Mando has some incredible performance. We'll have to see how often we check in, but we will be following along with them and with the Calder Cup playoffs through the rest of the summer. But I think that's about it for the analysis for now.
Yeah, I think that's a good wrap up of it, and I think too it's good for the fans to kind of take a look at the ECHL, because you never know who's going to be coming up next year as well, right? And I know that the executives up in Ottawa are keeping a keen eye on it and making sure that they got all their scouting reports on these guys, because like we said, 53 players this year, hopefully not that many next year, but you never know.
You never know, and you never know what the Belleville Sens podcast might bring over the course of the offseason. We don't even know. Every time we flip the mic on now for the next few months, it's going to be a surprise. But hopefully you found this week's show informative and maybe even a little bit entertaining. Thanks again to Dave Bell for his time. We're really stoked to have him back on board and leading this club officially, and more on the roster, of course, to come through the summer as well as we continue on ahead of the 23-24 season. One more reminder to subscribe to the podcast, rate and review. Head to BellevilleSens.com if you are looking for tickets for the upcoming season. Season tickets, Flex Packs, our Business Elite program is up and running, all of that fun stuff. And again, keep an eye out for Belly and the summer crew across the Bay of Quinte over the course of the next few months as well. That'll do it for us on episode 15. For Joel Vanderland, David Foote here, thanking you so much for listening. We will chat with you again at some point in the next few weeks on the Belleville Sens podcast.